Welcome to this talk. I feel honored to be here, even if only as my online self. I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about my operatic research and war. While working on mothers and singers in early modern opera, I have found quite a number of allusions to a war, but could not find extensive literature on these two topics combined. More and more, though, I had a hunch that this war even had something to do with the rise of maternal characters in opera, especially as both happened simultaneously. This conference seems the perfect place to connect the dots between these two different research areas. Research Area 1. Area 1. Opera. 18th century opera was partly used as a tool of aristocratic representation. In these terms, it was highly political in itself. The operatic world was, on the other hand, also about entertainment and, in particular, about feelings, the expression of emotions in music. The recited text, the so-called recitatives, contained the dramatic action. The arias were about feelings. Theatres showing operas were partly driven by economical reasons, partly by aristocratic patronage. Violence on stage took place in duels. War played a role but was never shown. Very rarely. It was the aftermath of war that matters for the feelings. Triumph on the one hand, desperation on the other. The wars that played a major role in Baroque opera are the ones that took place in ancient times, among Greeks and Romans, sometimes in medieval times. On this slide, we see an operatic stage printed on the occasion of a serenade, a panegyric stage form performed to flatter and honor an aristocratic personality. This particular serenade, La Gloria di Primavera, about the glory of spring, was financed by an aristocratic lady, Aurora Sanseverino, and her husband in Naples in 1716 to honor the birth of Austria's Prince Royal. She commissioned her poet, Niccolò Giovo, to write a dramatic contest between the seasons for the Austrian infant prince and his family. When it comes to the character of Summer, to describe her qualities, we are struck by brutal war descriptions. The first one referencing war enthusiasm, as I only know it from World War I. Divided allegiances, as known from civil wars, obeying different calls to arms. The second part of the recitative draws attention to the suffering of families, in particular mothers and sisters confronted with the blood of their husbands and brothers. These descriptions are followed by a tender and beautiful but also fragile aria that celebrates security, entitled Dopo l'orrore, after the horror. Such a realistic poetry in a flattering art form, performed by the singer I am researching, Margherita Durastanti, told me that the war was deeply ingrained in the collective memory of all people living in Italy at that time. In this paper, I would like to show insights into the lives of two women during this war and the post-war era. One, a queen, Anne of Britain. The other, a queen on stage, Margherita Durastanti. At the end of the paper, I show how their personas merge into a stage character of a special kind. Research Area 2, War. The War of the Spanish Succession is our topic. The official reason for its declaration was the lack of an heir at the Spanish court. This was something all parties anticipated for years, and therefore I assume that it was topic number one of literary salons, discussions among the intelligentsia, and among travelers long before the war started in 1701. The fertility of women was at stake, but also their claims to the throne. I do not want to bore you with the solutions proposed to prevent the war, but what I noticed is that some daughters of the Habsburg family renounced their claims to the throne, those in France, and some did not. Hence their son had claims. The actual reason was a power struggle between France and Austria. France provoked the declaration of war from Habsburg, and a few months later from Britain. The union was not official yet, but soon would be. The novum in 1702 was that a woman led one of the Allied forces. The newly crowned Queen Anne. In the past, the only woman whose army had been involved in warfare on a larger scale was Elizabeth I. Elizabethan wars took place mainly at sea. 100 years later, the war was much more spread over Europe and had even global dimensions. I included the Battle of Bloody Creek in the timeline to reflect this. In 1711, French troops, in collaboration with the Wabanaki Confederation of Indigenous Peoples, attacked a British-held fort in Nova Scotia. This part of the war is called Queen Anne's War, a war named after a woman. It seems that after a 300-year-old long quarrel about the question whether men and women were equal, the goal of the ladies was in reach. In 1713, the newly crowned Austrian Emperor Charles VI issued a law that his daughter could inherit his throne in case he remained without a male heir. It's called the Pragmatic Sanction. He was probably worried that another war would break out over the Austrian succession. Although this succession war broke out, his policy succeeded. His daughter Maria Theresa, the first female Catholic ruler in her own right, proved that a mother could well rule a country successfully. The Spanish Succession War was inseparable from Queen Anne. Here, portrait here. And as we will see, poets hailed her as the nomadic and Amazon-like queen and mother who resisted the Persian king Cyrus, known as Tomiris. There are two faces of Queen Anne: the imagined warrior and the exhausted woman who was so desperate for an adult child. Today we have letters and knowledge of what went on behind closed doors, but people 300 years ago did not know about Queen Anne's gout and obesity, and they imagined her as the successful heroine of the war. And women very likely drew inspiration from her. We know today that Anne did not have a say if she wanted this war or not. She got into office when all war preparations had been set, initiated by her predecessor William of Orange. She appointed the husband of her best friend as the general, and he, the Duke of Marlborough, made sure that Britain celebrated legendary triumphs, in particular the Battle of Blenheim, or Blindheim, a little place in Swabia, Germany today. In 1702, when the war effort started in Britain, Anne was still grieving the death of her only child that survived infancy after about 20 pregnancies, an 11-year-old boy. Margherita Durastanti, my research heroine, was at that time a teenager only, employed in Mantua and fearing for her life, as the Austrian general Prince of Savoy was blocking the supply to Mantua at the river. In the summer of this year, there was much fighting between the Austrian and French troops around Mantua, and the court there could certainly sense the war nearby. Hunger had raged in the town for 6 months. As soon as the Austrian siege ended, the Duke of Mantua took his court, including some of his opera troupe, to the heavily fortified Casale Monferrato in Piedmont. There, in 1703, Durastanti performed the role of Queen Tomiri in a staging in honor of and in the presence of Duke of Vendôme, the leader of the French army. All was financed by the king in France, who lent the money to the Duke of Mantua for his loyalty. The opera performed was La Statira. Here we see the title page with the dedication. Its topic is the Persian court and its intrigues. The leading protagonist is the title heroine, Queen Statira. Tomiri is the wife of the antagonist, an usurper and tyrant, or he fakes to be her husband. Complicated opera in those days is very, very complicated. There were earlier versions on the Persian court, mainly in 1666 and 1685, but these earlier versions had no female character by the name Tomiri. Was this very name an allusion to Queen Anne? Perhaps. In any case, Durastanti's Tomiri in this staging is treated shockingly badly. First suffering physical abuse, specified by the stage directions in the libretto, then imprisonment. She's finally driven to suicide. Only at the last minute she's kept from drinking the poisoned cup. Such brutality was surely emotionally connected to the violence that was happening in the fields of northern Italy at that time. I had a look at one of the bloodiest battles of these years, the Battle of Lusara near Mantua in 1702. What I realized is that the soldiers who fought and lost their lives there were far away from home. The French army employed Irish battalions, for example. Armies in those days consisted entirely of mercenaries. Hence, the image evoked in the serenade above of mothers looking for their wounded sons in the fields is poetic imagination, but one that strikes the listener and reader to the core. The soldiers who died in Italy and had mothers in Ireland, France, and all over Europe who mourned them. In 1705, the French army withdrew from northern Italy. No sources survived on Durastanti between the years 1704 and 1705. Many years later, she appeared on stage again as Tomiri, as we will see at the end. Coming back to Queen Anne, we see here a panegyric poem to her, comparing her with the Amazon-like Queen of Scythia. For an English-Italian opera entitled Tomiri's Queen of Scythia in 1707. This was actually Queen Tomiri's, leader of the Massageti in today's Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, a national heroine in both countries. From the Greek historian Herodotus, we have been handed down the information that she beheaded the mighty Persian king Cyrus. In this poem, synonymous with the French king, as we see here, by her arms, Grand Cyrus was hurled by a woman. And it's implied that it's Anna with her warrior sword. Why was she, Queen Tomiri, chosen to represent Queen Anne? This is because she was also a mother, mourning her dead son. In Queen Tomiri, two features, maternity and feisty military intelligence, come together as in no other ancient character. She provided poets with a perfect connection to the Amazonian representation of Queen Elizabeth. Here we can see Elizabeth on a horse fighting a snake-like dragon on the on the augurial medal in 1702. We can see Anne, Queen Anne, as Athena, also fighting the snakes of heresy, as they were interpreted back then. The scene of Tomiri or Tomiris being presented the head of Cyrus, as painted here on the right, does appear in the London Opera version of Tomiri in 1721 with Durastanti. The opera was L'Odio e l'Amore or Ciro, and Durastanti had the leading role, not the title role, the leading role, the leading female role. Before we head to 1721, let us dwell in the year 1713 for a while, or 1712-13. The year of the first and the most successful peace treaty of the War of the Spanish Succession was 1713, a few months before the death of Queen Anne. The Peace of Utrecht ensured Britain's imperial and naval dominance. Austria's emperor wanted to continue the war and reluctantly agreed to a peace deal a year later. Shortly before these two peace deals, Durastanti appeared as the Roman consul Spurio Postumio, who negotiates a peace deal that is considered non-honorable for Rome. The libretto was by Agostino Piovene, and the composer was Sui F. Polarolo. The parallel to real life is striking. In the end, Postumio and his very proud and influential mother convince Rome that Postumio does not need to die for this peace deal. The quote here by Postumio conveys a certain war weariness, which must have resonated after more than 10 years of war. He fears for the death of others. In 1721, Britain had just avoided a civil war after the Catholic Stuart pretender tried to make his way to the throne in London, coming from Paris. Durastanti as Tomiri in the opera L'Odio e l'Amore or Ciro. Rolli was the librettist after Norris, an Italian librettist or poet, and Bononcini was the composer. Her Tomiri makes a U-turn in terms of emotions. Inspired by beauty and love upon seeing the injured Ciro or Cyrus, in this opera it's his general Ciro who is beheaded, not the king Ciro. A typical confusion trick in Baroque opera. She leaves the revenge campaign for her dead son behind and becomes susceptible for peace and compassion. This quote, "I am now a kind conqueror and a friend," appears to me to be on the line of make love, not war, especially as Tomiri marries at the end of the opera. This Tomiri also comments on Queen Anne, especially as the 1707 opera was performed in a theater nearby as well, also say in the same seasons. Although hailed as a warrior queen at the beginning, Queen Anne was a suffering and relatable mother on the throne, not a virgin figure like Elizabeth I, and in spite of all her health troubles, she made sure that Britain achieved a prosperous peace. In her victory, there is more threat to patriarchy than in the exceptional and self-staged Elizabeth I. And perhaps this is the reason why Anne is to this day belittled as a ruler. Once, however, she inspired many stage poets around 1700 to elevate the role of the mother through Margherita Durastanti, among others. Thank you very much, and here some literature links and information. Thank you very much. Bye. We see each other at the QA.